Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Straight On Till Morning. Pink among the salarymen. The way to London was not unknown to fairies, it was just rarely used anymore. Smog was bad for wings, and the new machines made for strange dreams and children. Fewer and fewer of the sunny meadows and hidden vales at once captured their imagination. When Tink appeared in the sky above, it was as if a shy star had worked up the courage to appear among its brighter cousins. She glimmered golden and faint at first, then brighter and nearer, but never any larger. The sound she made as she descended, however, was not the music of the spheres or anything so celestial. It fell somewhere between angry hornet and angry percussionist shaking a rack of bells for the worst ever Christmas concert. Below her, all of London was gray and rolling and endless and eternally the same. If she squinted, the little fairy could almost pretend that instead of houses, the streets were lined with the hives of mere rabbits, maybe from the wrong side of the savannah, but friendly nonetheless. The thing was, Tinkerbell hadn't actually paid attention when Peter took her on these jaunts. She loved hearing about Peter's babyhood. She loved visiting his lost home. But she hated going to ugly Wendy's house. She had no idea how Peter had ever even found the girl and her stupid, snotty little brothers. Somehow, the stories Wendy told of his exploit ad nauseum had reached his pixie ears in a way that was just quintessential Panish. It was near Kensington Gardens, wasn't it? She flew the way she vaguely remembered she used to go, following the Thames and keeping an eye out for pockets of green among the gray, brown, and black. Aha! At last, something familiar. She recognized the updraft had suddenly lifted her high in the sky and made it difficult for someone as light as she had land anywhere. Peter never had any trouble. Once in a while, she clung to his collar while he drove through gusts, and these were the best moments of all. The sky was just beginning to lighten as Tinkerbell touched down a spark inside a park. She felt some fairy familiarity. Magic had not entirely deserted his ancient place, but these fae folk of earthly origin, and she had no time for such riffraff. She was Neverland empty reel, and she had work to do. Well, she peeped around the garden gate up the street. She realized that some things looked very different when you were down among the ugly buildings and not high above them. At least it was early, and she had the city mostly to herself while she explored. There was only a few humans around this time of morning. A solitary girl hurried along, looking over her shoulder every few steps. She was large and ugly. Was it Wendy? Tinkerbell approached her eagerly, but no, up close it was obvious the girl's dress was shabby and poor, and her eyes darted around in fear. They didn't hold steady in dreams. Toward this not Wendy girl, a pair of men strode broadly. Their voices were loud, and their dress obviously fine, even to a forest pixie's eyes. Great silk and wool cape, shiny top hats slightly askew, walking canes with glittering knobs. Much like foxes and wolves, they had always been out all night, hunting for whatever rare things these humans craved. Eyeglasses, taxes, cream puffs. Taxes? Eat gas! Is that the singer from the Moulin Rouge? The one you like so much? One of the men said, guffawing, pointing at the human girl. Good evening, sirs, she says, pulling her collar close and hurrying past them. The other man put his hand and stopped her, then looked her up and down. No, she's a bad copy. Still, please, sirs, let me go. I'm on my way home. From what nefarious activities, I should like to know, the first man with a snort. Would anyone even miss you at home? All these decent girls have been in bed asleep for hours by now. They're not out wandering the streets at night looking for trouble. I ain't looking for trouble. Just let me go, she pleaded. Tinkerbell's eyes widened as she watched the man reach out to touch the girl's cheek. Before she knew knew what she was doing. The little fairy was suddenly zooming in between the two, pelting pixie dust into the man's eyes. The reaction was immediate. He howled and clawed at his face like a madman. His friend drew back in surprise. The girl saw her chance and ran off, mouthing silent thanks to her mysterious savior. The ball of light now zooming away bright and visibly, thanks to a new believer in fairy magic. I can see, the man moaned, falling to his knees. I see too much. The world is as it really is. The great god Pan. But Tink was already whisking down the street, that adventure over and forgotten. There were plenty of street signs in this London, if only she could read. She remembered how a big tree at the house. That's how Peter always found it. A big tree and tiny yard with unused doghouse below. The windows to the nursery were on a level with the highest branches of the tree, so they could perch there and listen. If Peter was especially enamored of the story, they could glide silently over to the roof and lie over the slate shingles, half listening, half dreaming. Some of the street trees were indeed large, grand, and imposing, and sadly penned in, surrounded by cobbles and flagstones. None were in a yard. Human movement increased as the sun rose. Lamps were doused and people came out. They were sweeping the streets, hurrying into shops, unlocking doors with big keys. Tinkerbell buzzed unseen over everyone's heads, looking out for a young woman of a certain height. Aha, there. A woman in a very familiar blue dress entered a bookstore and coughed to get the bookseller's attention. How perfectly Wendy. Tinkerbell zoomed down to see if it was Dean Hurl. The girl definitely seemed more likely than the first one. All light, her skin looked darker, and her hair too, but who could tell? Humans were strange. Maybe they could change now and then. I have a question about a book, please. The girl spoke softly. No, that was definitely not Ugly Wendy. Ugly Wendy wasn't shy when she spoke. She was loud, and the fairy's ears strident and pushy. My wares are far more refined and intellectual than what will satisfy the looks of you. The shop owner snapped out, even looking up from his own book. I doubt you can even read. Where are you from? My parents are from Barbados, sir. I was born in England and am a citizen. Hartley, please leave my premises at once. But, now get out, now, or I shall summon the constable. Your kind is not welcome here. The girl sighed, shook her head, and left. Tinkerbell also buzzed off, confused and full of unquiet thoughts. She paused to catch her breath and sort things out, and also shut to a couple of nearby mice. They would probably very much enjoy comfy nests that made exclusively out of a shop's worth of shredded books. They agreed and scampered off, summoning a dozen of their friends. Wendy was a big, ugly girl. That was just the truth of the matter. And she took Peter's attention away from Tink, despite being big and ugly. But was this the world she lived in? Where random men tried to hurt her? Where even if a girl was polite, people ignored her, yelled at her, made fun of her? Was this why Ugly Wendy stayed inside all the time, telling stories to her brothers? Because it was safe? Because she could be whatever she wanted? Maybe her brothers were also ugly, but at least they treated her with respect. Tinkerbell shook her head, trying to physically beat the thoughts out. They were complicated and negative, and felt strangely similar to the ones she had about Peter and convincing him that his shadow wasn't in London. There was something icky about them, like the bad-smelling grackle med you could never completely get off. You always thought you had, but there would be just a tiny bit somewhere, and you wouldn't be able to find it, and you would stink embarrassingly for days. She rose in the air to find her mind clean. She skimmed among the roofs and chimneys and spires of London, spiraling out wider and wider, expanding her search. Sometime mid-morning, when the tired sun crawled into its work clothes of smoke and dust, Tinkerbell finally found the attic gable she remembered from years before. But unlike every other time when she and He had come to listen to the stories. The windows were shut and fastened tight. Tinkerbell frowned and whisked back and forth. She tapped to the glass angrily with her tiny knuckles. No one was there. She zoomed in the garden and up to the kitchen door and knocked out, trying to stick her head into the too small keyhole. She jingled furiously when she got stuck there for a moment. Then she heard a scratch on the other side, almost like a response to her knock. She redoubled her efforts, slamming against the feet first. The door pulled slowly and laboriously inward, and she tumbled into the darling household. There were no humans about, only the dog was there. She regarded the fairy with large, woeful eyes, but the little fairy didn't stop her to say hello or thank you. She zoomed in like an angry horde from room to room until she found the stairs and zipped up to them. And then the second set of stairs when she realized her destination lay on the floor. The low thudding of steps of Nama came up slowly behind her, as well as a doggy sigh or two. Here was the terrible room, where ugly Wendy told her stories about her brothers, while Tink and Peter stayed outside listening in, with all of its stupid, ugly, large human tools and bits and pieces littering the room. So, though it seemed like there was a far less clutter than last time. She flew chaotically back and forth, over lamps and trucks, into the garden wardrobe amongst the clothes, causing dust of both the general and pixie varieties to spray about indiscriminately. Woof. Nana had finally made it to the top of the stairs and sat down on her haunches with resignation, knowing it would do little good just to try to physically stop the fairy. Tinkerbell stopped her buzzing around and hovered in front of the dog, angrily jingling questions. Woof, Nana said, rolling her eyes toward the burrow. Tinkerbell flew in the half-open top door so hard she bonked against the stack. She might have trapped inside had Nana not put up a massive paw to stop the door from closing. The fairy looked around frantically, lighting up every corner with her glow. But all the shadows behaved normally, twisting and shrinking and growing with her movements. None were Peter's. She flew out and glared at the dog. Nana didn't respond, hearing something about her giant dog ears that even a fair pixie couldn't at first. Something horrible was waking, bones clicked into place as it stretched its feeble limbs, and realized it was all alone. Yep. Tinkerbell froze. Another dog? Where were the humans? Where were Wendy and her two brothers? What was going on here? She hadn't realized how much she expected things to be exactly the same as before. 3 children in the nursery, Nana puttering about, furniture and toys askew. Everything had changed suddenly and strangely, like a spring after a bad winter, where plants came up where they hadn't before. Fear began to sneak through her anger. She jiggled tentatively. In answer, Nana just jerked her head towards the window. Peter's shadow and Wendy were somewhat behind the clouds, beyond London. Tinkerbell jingled a hesitant question. Woof. Tink's facility with dog speak wasn't perfect, so there's no way to be certain that Nana had said anything at all about pirates. Right? Without a second thought, Tinkerbell took off as fast as she could, out of the house and into the clouds. That's the end of that chapter. Bye.